The next area that we're going to discuss is risk assessment. To ensure that an organisation understands the risks that it faces, that will enable it to introduce the correct level of risk mitigation, it must first conduct a risk assessment. During the planning stage of a risk assessment, an organisation should identify, collect and analyse its own internal data sources, and it must also consider international resources that highlight the global threats from fraud. The first document that we need to consider is the Report to the Nations by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. This report outlines a number of global threats from fraud. One of the areas it discusses is the threat to organisations from inadequate risk assessment. It highlights that many organisations only have a reactive response to risk. Specifically, they only assess risk where fraud suspicions have been identified or reported. One of the issues with this approach is that an organisation is unlikely to fully understand its risk profile. A proactive approach focuses on knowledge, controls and monitoring. As an example, if an organisation's staff and suppliers aren't proactively trained in how to identify the typologies and methods of procurement fraud, it is likely that an organisation will only identify a percentage of fraud risks that it faces. It also highlighted from the organisations interviewed that only 54% of organisations globally said they have conducted a general fraud risk assessment in the past 2 years. Fewer than a third said their company performed risk assessments in the critical areas of anti-bribery and corruption. And 1 in 10 respondents had not performed any risk assessment in the past 2 years. So where you have either a reactive approach or no fraud risk assessment, an organisation is at greater risk from the impact of fraud. Within the PwC Global Economic Crime and Fraud Survey, similar findings were made to risk assessment. The survey confirmed that 6 in 10 organisations don't have a programme to address bribery and corruption risk. Nearly half of all respondents either don't perform a risk assessment or only perform an informal one. Fewer than 3 in 10 companies perform limited testing of the operating effectiveness of their controls, and another 12% do no testing at all. And only 56% of organisations conduct an investigation of their worst incidents. What is of concern in this final point is that where no investigation is conducted of the worst incidents, how can an organisation determine the root cause or the scale of the problem? And additionally, how do we ensure that this type of event can't happen again?